Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Nitya go Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo.
Nitya Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitya go Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo.
Jai Vishnu Baba Ramanza Bari Bharakacharya Astutara Satsa Siman A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Kori Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Brahmsgo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Radha Krishna Gogopak Shamakunda Radha Kundgiri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Turidam Dhokadam Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Get my water. Okay, Haribol. I'd like to start by kind of saying that Srila Prabhupada has no beginning and no end, so his pastimes are unlimited also. And he shared those pastimes with some of his, or basically all of his thousands of disciples, his surrendered souls that came here to assist him. So in some way or other, he related with everybody and gave them something special that made them feel they were very special. So with me, there was quite a bit of it. So, you know, it never went to my head that I'm the chosen one, like it did some other people. But at the same time, I will kind of go through my history and how I came to be the one that went out to develop this, build Mayapur buildings and a Bombay temple, which was quite a feat, and basically the only one doing it. If we hadn't worked the way we did, it would not have been accomplished in the short period. Ultimately, Srila Prabhupada's desire would have been done by somebody, but I was sent in this world for that purpose, and that's what I did on his order. So I'll just explain. In the beginning of my Krishna conscious life, I had just come back from Vietnam. I was 19 and I had just turned 20. I was 19 in Vietnam and I just was 20 years old in 2 months when I came back. So, you know, nothing to do, didn't want to go. I come from San Francisco, so all my school friends were now faking college just so they didn't have to go to work. And smoking dope, and well, you know, when I was young, we used to take LSD. Being from San Francisco, at 15, we were taking that. Nobody even knew about it then. But anyway, so I went to the Family Dog one night. If anybody knows what the Family Dog is, there were two prime rock places. One was the Fillmore Auditorium, the other was the Family Dog down at the beach. So that evening, this van pulled up, and I'm standing there with this guy that was my friend in Vietnam, and some girl that was after me that I had no interest in, but we were going inside to see, I think it was Eric Burton and Country Joe and the Fish or something like that. And this van pulls up and these people jump out. It was extraordinary. What a sight. Bald heads, cold down at the beach, cold wind, no chudders, no jackets, no shoes, flip-flops. And then I thought I was pretty far out until I saw them, you know. And then one of them gave me a magazine. He said, you can give a donation. So I gave him like $1 or something. And, you know, I'd taken some peyote. Then I was like, what are we going to do with this book? I can't carry this around all night. So I very nicely set it next to the building and went in. And when I'm in there, all you can hear is the chanting because it hadn't started. And I was like, would they shut up, these people? My God, you know. But a week later, one devotee, Annie Bruda, maybe somebody knows him. He is one of the 1966 devotees from 2nd Avenue. He had fallen away, and I was living on Baker Street next to the Panhandle in Haight-Ashbury, and he was on, I was in this really nice one where the fireplace was, my room. They were all separate rooms, and I'd go upstairs to the communal kitchen up on the top floor, and I heard this mumbling and smelt this smell, and I knocked on his door. I said, what are you doing? And I don't know who he was. And then I saw this picture of Srila Prabhupada, and I just pushed him aside and barged into his room. And I said, who is that? He said, he knows everything. And I said, where can I meet him? I want to meet this person. He said, told me where the temple was. It was about 5-6 blocks away on Frederick Street. And they have a program on Sunday, and I went. So Jayananda was my first real devotee, and he was at the door. And there's a lot of stories, which I have a lot to say, but anyway, I got in. This Sunday later, I shaved up. You know, I came every day and, shaved up. I think I had like $6,000 or $7,000, and I just gave it. And I was a record collector, so I had 600-700, jazz, rock, blues, anything but Elvis Presley or the Beatles. I didn't have any of that, So I gave the keys to my apartment, and I had a pound of opium that I'd sent from Vietnam in one of those elephants, that we put the Tulsi plant on. And I taped it, and when I got home, my mother said, you got a package, and I'd totally forgotten about it. And I went in there and I said, oh my God. But when I got back home, there was no need for that stuff. But since Vietnam was a crazy place, kind of like, everything you've seen about movies. So I gave him the pound, and I think Annie Ruda took that. And anyway, as I was there, then I was working very hard and going every day on the street, 6 to 8 hours. That's what we did, chanting and up till midnight then, because Hair, that rock, whatever it was playing, and we'd stay till they came out. We'd collect more money in that 15 minutes when they would come out than we did on North Beach all evening. So then I went over to Berkeley with Jayananda because they needed somebody, and Jayananda took me with him. And then we had no money, so I had to go out and sell incense. And I made all these incense accounts going into malls as a devotee in 1970. Out in suburbia, that wasn't so easy. In the city, nobody looked twice, but out there. And then I decided to come to India. So I heard about what was going on, and then I came and went to Mumbai, and then in Mumbai, Prabhupada came the first time. He had been checked at the airport. They quarantined him for having yellow fever. He didn't have a yellow fever shot. So Sham Shunder made a big noise about it with the customs people, the health officials. Do you know who he is? And like this, and the next thing you know, there was a big noise, and then they told Srila Prabhupada, we have to take you. And then Prabhupada turned to Sham Shunder and he said, if you'd have just been nice and polite, he would have let us gone. But you had to be argumentative. So that was our mercy, that he was in this house out in Andheri, and nothing around there but a bunch of shrubs and stuff. And we got to sit with him all day, and he would tell stories, Mahabharata and stuff. And up till midnight, like that. So the doctor came on the third day, and he told the doctor, he said, I have appointments, I have things to do, I must leave now. And the doctor said, yes, but you may have a yellow fever. We have to wait 7 days. And Srila Prabhupada said, I cannot get any disease. And the doctor said, you cannot? He said, no, I cannot get any disease. He said, when you put the iron in the fire, it becomes fire. He said, when you're purely Krishna conscious, you can't get any disease. So the doctor signed him off. So, then he was staying in Mumbai a lot, and we had the deities there, the ones that are in Bombay right now, Rasa Bihari. They were in the living room. We were in an apartment on 7th floor. It's ironic that the war happened with Pakistan, and the Pakistan India embassy was on the 2nd floor, and we were on the 7th floor. So just to see how everything progressed very sweetly. I'm an innocent kid. I didn't know much. And Srila Prabhupada, we couldn't play music for Mangal Arti because it's an apartment building. We'd play a tape. Srila Prabhupada would usually come out, and one day he came out, and one of his, I don't know which one, would play one of his bhajans, and he was looking at Radha Rasa Bihari, and the tears were flowing so much that there was a puddle on the floor. I'm serious. There was a small puddle. And I sat there like a dog looking at a steak, And as soon as he turned around, I jumped on those puddles. And the other devotees didn't seem to know, I got some. So Prabhupada would, my service was to put his chandan on in the morning. So I'd make the chandan and go in his room as the sun rose and put it on his head. And I'd ask him the stupidest stuff, Srila Prabhupada, do you ever think of your Guru Maharaj? Prabhupada, he was very kind. He said, I'm always feeling the presence of my spiritual master. And then a couple of days after doing that, he looked at me and said, you don't like me, do you? And I said, yes, Prabhupada, I like you. He said, then why are you hitting me? I was putting it on like that, So Prabhupada personally trained me, and he told me he would. So all the ways he did it was very very scientifically, spiritually, not too much, a little here, a little there. He would show me a little opulence of his, spiritual opulence. It's like we walk in the morning, and he did this many times. We have to remain a fool. That's the first principle of a neophyte, especially us hard-headed Westerners who think we're smarter than everybody else, that we don't know anything. And we still don't know anything. And whatever we do know is his blessings. So it's not ours to claim. So he would ask me things like, what's that grass doing growing in the crack? Well, I don't know. Everything was, I don't know. And then he wouldn't answer me. He wouldn't answer it. There was a statue by the beach in Madras. This guy on a horse. Who's that guy on a horse? I don't know. Everything was, I don't know. He was making me understand that I don't know. So let's see where we went from there. So anyway, the thing was this. I went to Mayapur. We went for the first Gaur Purnim, but there weren't Western devotees. It was only the Indian devotees. And we were poor. I mean, so poor. We had no money. Jai Bataka was so cheap. He'd give us 2 rupees to go out there all day and put up posters. We'd make our own paste with flour and go out there and slap it up wherever we could. 2 rupees, we'd get some bananas and some boiled peanuts or something and come back. And they were throwing stuff at us. The Indian news had come out and said we were CID or CIA agents. They'd come by, yank our sikas, throw stuff at us, spit at us. It was it wasn't very nice. And even on the train, they would sometimes gather around me, or it'd be a few of us, and ready to kill us. So anyway, then I went. I went back to Mumbai, and then I heard Prabhupada's going to Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada's coming to Vrindavan. So that's the videos you see where he went to Nandagram and took a bath in Jamuna and took us. So I asked Madhuvisa, who was the president, I said, Madhuvisa, I want to go. He said, no, you have to collect. We don't have any money. I said, yeah, but Prabhupada in Vrindavan is the chance of a lifetime. He said, no. So I went anyway. Me and Rishi Kumar got a train. I had jaundice too. I got a train to, I thought, I've been drinking a lot of coconuts in Mumbai, and so I'm on the train going to Delhi, and it's January, and I'm wondering why it's getting cold and where are the coconuts, and there wasn't any. And then we land in Mathura, it's freezing cold. We get to Vrindavan, and we didn't know what to do. So, because people were chastising us. If you wanted like a lassie, they'd make you stand back 3 feet and throw it to you. We were so untouchable, and we were scared to make a mistake. So I wanted to take a bath in the Jamuna, and so I watched these sadhus for like 20 minutes to make sure I didn't do anything wrong, And then Srila Prabhupada came, and I think Yadubar got married then at that time. And my point I'm getting to is, then I was with Prabhupada in his room a lot, and I'd always sit there and listen to him, the heavyweight champion of the world, watch how he just took these people apart, but without destroying them, and he'd be so sweet. So then I figured he had this inner circle that was like, Shyam Shunder, the older guys were there, and then I started figuring, well, Tamal took sannyas. That's the point. He took sannyas, and he took me with him, and we went to Ahmedabad. And Prabhupada didn't want to give him sannyas, but he kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and Prabhupada, like a little kid, he finally relented. And then 2 months later, he got back into management. But we went there, and we went to Bihar and drove all over the place, doing programs. So then Srila Prabhupada wanted me and Tamal to go to Bangladesh. And he went to get a visa, but he went in his dhoti, war going on, East Pakistan and all Muslims, and he's going to walk in there in a dhoti. So then he tried to go to Delhi to do it and wear karmi clothes. So I'm in Mayapur, and I'm thinking I get away from this guy, and I got to go do something to get Prabhupada's attention, because that's how you got close to him, is you got his attention. He just didn't like buddy up to you. You had to do something extraordinary. So I'm in Mayapur, and Srila Prabhupada came, and he wanted R&R, rest and recuperation, for 2 days. And we had a bamboo fence built around his room. All there was that single house now, his Bhajan Kutir. So there was a little bamboo fence around it, and he would lay out there. He'd get a massage. I don't remember who his masseuse was, or his servant. And nobody bothering him, didn't give class. And so then when he's leaving, I'm like really upset. What do I got to do here? And I knew I had to go do something, and I was thinking in my head, I'd seen, because I was in Mumbai for the first 8 months, and when I got there in the temple, all I'm used to do is chanting on the street in America. And there was no chanting allowed. Probably didn't want to do it in the beginning. And I said, well, what's my service? And they handed me a phone book. It said, go make life members. I said, well, where do I find them? In the phone book, start calling people. And you know, you open up and it is about 100 pages of Patels and a bunch of Shahs and a bunch of Guptas. It's like, what is this? So, but I did all right. And my area was Kulbadevi, Bombay 9. And Bombay 9 was, steel and spices, and so I always saw the trucks that said Bangalore, Bangalore. So then I'm in Mayapur, and then I'm thinking, I'm going to go to this place called Bangalore, And then Srila Prabhupada, it was cool. He came, the car came, and he was going back to Calcutta. And I came out and put my head on his feet and was holding him. I wouldn't let go for a little bit. And then I got up, and he looked at me, and he said, there is a man in Navadvip who says he's Lord Chaitanya, and he's having a meeting today. I want you to go there and defeat him. I said, okay, no problem. So I went there, and there was a big meeting, 500 Bengalis, and I'm a brahmachari. I got my brahmachari clothes, and I get up on stage, and they all want to hear the guy, and I had a translator. I said, you're Lord Chaitanya? And he said, yes. I said, why are you so short? And like this, I had it was probably a comedy act, I just tore the guy up, and they all laughed him off the stage, and, so. Anyway, we did go. I got some letters from a Mr. Ravel in Calcutta. The Calcutta Prasadam was non-existent. They were going to the U.S. Embassy and getting soybean meal and mixing up soybean with water and feeding it. We called it gook. They'd plop it on the banyan leaf and plop it. No food. Seriously. So I met this man. He was a big coal merchant, Mr. Ravel, and his wife. They had Jagannath deity. So we just show up there, and his wife would head to the kitchen. And then I made friends with, what was his name? Padma Tiwari. Anybody know Tiwari? Really? They're like the Haldirams of Calcutta. Before Haldiram came into existence, or they were big, and they have the best in North Calcutta. North Calcutta is where all the Mawaris live. And they got the big, you get the primo samosas, and his father made him a restaurant upstairs. He was a playboy, but he told us, come and you can eat anytime. So we'd go eat there, or go to Mr. Ravel's, and he gave me a letter of introduction. We got a couple cases of Ishopanishads and Gitas, and threw them on a train. And, you're not supposed to bring that stuff on a train, but we did. But when we got to Madras, and we had to take another train to Bangalore, South India is another whole nother scene. They don't allow that, and it's very clean, and people are polite, and they said you can't do that. Anyway, we got him there on a train station. We had one letter. So there was 2 brahmacharis with us, Yashodananda and myself. So we go to check this letter out. And the guy's in the military. He's got chickens in his yard and a coop. And we can't stay with this guy, So we just, he said, I can't help you, and we don't want to stay. I said, well, where can we stay? So he dropped us off at a Shiva temple, a little small one that's on the corner of a big city. And they had a room, and everybody peed on the wall outside. And there was no window, just some bars, and the whole room stunk of urine. And we hadn't eaten in days. So I took a walk, and I'm looking, and I saw a big fancy house. The guy opens the door. I said, are you vegetarian? He says, yes, pure vegetarian. I said, we've come 12,000 miles to taste your cooking. We're very hungry. Please feed us. He said, okay. We ate there for 3 months, every day. He had cooks up on the roof. He had a whole kitchen, not on the roof, but a top floor of his 6-story house. Wood fire, really, really good stuff. And we went around, then we met Mr. Then I saw this big house, super, way set back on this property. And we'd go by in the tuk-tuk. So I stopped one day, and they had a great garden. I said, we want to come inside. He said, no. And I used to wear wooden shoes. So I started stamping at his bare feet. And he was jumping back, and we went in. And long story short, I can tell you a whole bunch that happened there, but this guy was the liquor manufacturer of India. Beer factories, beer breweries, whiskey making, also, 50 other products, like clothes picks, carbon paper. He was a character and a half. And a funny story, though, he said, do a program. They had a room that was as big as a basketball court, like a gymnasium. And we're sitting there waiting to chant, and all these retards are walking by. This retard, that retard. And I'm wondering, is this a mental institution? What's going on here? So we start chanting, and then he turns into Krishna. He's running around with his flute and stuff. And then he takes us to eat something, and it's like a cafeteria. And what I found out was, then I found out he was the liquor baron, so then I understood in India you get instant birth and karma. And it was like cafeteria. Anyway, so we went there, and then we met Sampat Kumar Bhattacharya, who was the head of the Tulsi Mandir, and the top Brahmin for the Ramanuja Sampradaya. Oh, what a Brahmin. Srila Prabhupada loved him. We met him later. Very round, big head, laughing, always jolly, So he said, I'll take you to Tirupati. So we went to Tirupati. And this man Lakshman Sai just got everything out of him. So he sat there all night. And he gave us a car. He had 25 of them. So we went up to Tirupati, and then we met the trustees, and we were the first ones to know Sanskrit. We were Brahma Samhita and pronounce it properly. He taught us, the proper pronunciation, and we memorized. We'd been memorizing, 10 verses a week for months, about a year at that point. And they were very impressed, and then they had a meeting for 5 minutes, and if we don't allow you in, it's like not letting the Kumaras into Vaikuntha. It will be cursed. So from then on, ISKCON got in, And then from there, we went to Madurai, Coimbatore, Trichinopalli. We did a program twice in Sri Rangam. And stayed with the relative of the descendant of the one Lord Chaitanya stayed with. And went to, it can go on like this. So then after all that stuff, in making members for a few years, I went to America and I didn't like it, but we went around. And while I was going, living in a van for 7 months, we were collecting everywhere, every city. I think we went to 40 states. The only temple that would let us come was Sri Govinda in Chicago and Mukundlal in St. Louis. And otherwise, they didn't want us around, because the boys would all want to come. We were pretty fired up. So then every month I just started sending money to Vrindavan. I don't know why. I'd done it for Mayapur for the first building, and now I just, you're not supposed to keep money, so I give it and give it. So then I decide I'm finished with America. I'm going to go back to India. I'm speaking in India, Rotary Club, Lions Club, Kiwanis Club, temples with 3, 5, 10,000 people every night, every other night. And now I got these college kids with their feet up on the desk, and all they want to know is why I got mud on my head. Going out of here. So then Karandar, I called Karandar in L.A., and he says, I told him, I'm in Utah. I was in San Jose. Karandar didn't want to give us any area, and so I didn't like California. I said, okay, I'm going to go new. We went to Utah, and he said, I got a letter from Srila Prabhupada. And the letter says, and he read it, you're like my senior preacher and this and that. I want you to stay in America 1 year, and send me $5,000 a month for my Vrindavan project. And 1 more day in America, no way. So I said, you tell Prabhupada I'll get him that money in 1 month, and I'm going back to India in January. And we went everywhere, D.C., Turnpike, New Jersey, all these places. We drove from Utah to Indianapolis, 10 hours, and did that for a couple of days. Went to Minneapolis, New York. I had to give you more stories there, but to get to it, it got 55,000 in that time, and brought it to Prabhupada. We took the red eye from Miami to L.A. So I'm coming in, so we come to see Prabhupada, and it's like 7 in the morning, and we're walking up the stairs to his room. If you've been to L.A. Temple, you know where Prabhupada's room is. It's upstairs. So walking up the stairs, and out comes this skinny guy, and I know who he is, because I had met him, and he was an elitist. And he looks at me and says, you can't go in Prabhupada's room right now, And I said, yes, I can. He said, no, you can't. I said, if you don't move, you're flying, And then Prabhupada comes out. Oh, you've come. So he moves aside, we go in. He tries to come in, and I just pushed him. I said, he didn't invite you, I had no clothes. Prabhupada went in his drawer and gave me his chudder. That's the one in the room. He gave me his chudder because he said, why you don't have clothes? I said, I gave you all the money. I didn't buy anything for myself, So then he said, I'm going to go to India. You can come with me. We're going to Hawaii. And I said, no, I don't want to go to Hawaii. I said, I'll meet you in Delhi, So there's a bunch of stories there. So then we come to Vrindavan, and it's like February, it's cold, and Prabhupada's room was finished, not the temple. It was still working on it. And there were brick roof.
It was rendered with code. It was rendered with code inside. It's not bricks and mortar.
So I think that's the time George Harrison came, and you know that story? That was pretty cool. It was Bhakti Siddhanta's appearance day, and we were sitting and chanting, Very, very intimate. Cold outside, maybe 10 of us in the room. And very Prabhupada was in a really, really mellow mood, so George walks in. Yeah. Gurudas brought him. Yeah, he brought him in, and Ravi Shankar. And I was leading the kirtan. So I'm like, it's a Beatle. Oh, cool. Just singing away, and then we stop. Then Prabhupada starts singing Samsara. Nobody recorded it. It was really, really emotional, real melody, really nice. And when he finished, he looked at George and he looked at Ravi, and he said, "You're both very famous, especially you, George. What is your guarantee for the next life? Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena seva." You must surrender to a bona fide spiritual master. So after they all left, I said to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, my faith increased in you so much today. You didn't flatter these people. Such a big, rich people. You just told them the same thing you tell everybody else. So then I was sitting with Prabhupada. Every night he was doing fourth chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. Fourth chapter. And before fourth chapter, he was singing the six Goswami prayers. We would sing the six Goswami prayers, and then he would do his, sit there. So then one evening after, I stayed alone with him in the room, and then he started talking to me. He said, I want you to go back and keep collecting for Vrindavan. I said, Prabhupada, no way, I'm not doing this anymore. He said, you're going to do it, He said, I said, Prabhupada, you know what it took to get that money? I was collecting, basically 12 hours a day with 6 hours of sleep. It was 18 hours. We'd start in the morning at 7, end at 9, 13 hours collecting every day. I said, we were working 18 hours a day. 18 hours? I said, our process is 24. And so then I didn't agree with him. The next night he started again. And I said, Prabhupada, why you gave me this sannyas and I can't, and you just told, and I have to go get money. That doesn't mix. And then he quotes Bhagavad-Gita, anasrita karma phalam karyam karma karotiya. Sasanyasi, he said like that, sasanyasi. One who works is he's obligated and not attached to the result is a sannyasi. He said, that's sannyas. So finally, then he pulled out his ace in the hole, my soft heart, he said, my Guru Maharaj sent me to the West. He ordered me to go to the Western countries, and I've done that. Now, I have my own desire. I want to build temples in India, but my Western disciples don't believe in it, and they will not give me any money. I cannot get money, and I want this building. My first service is to translate the books, and I am getting letters and dealing with people, and my head is hot. He said, my head is hot. How will I build this? So then I told him, Srila Prabhupada, from today on, never think of money. I will get the money and you write the books. So then I walked out of the room talking to myself, what the heck did I just say? I'm not going back to America. That was hell, living in a van, getting chased by the security guards in malls everywhere, living with a Coleman stove, eating khichdi every day. So then I go to Mayapur. I'm still thinking about what I'm going to do. And then Gopal Swami here Those that live here know he doesn't come out. He's not healthy. He's staying in MBT. I got wounded in Vietnam, and they sent me to Japan to get operated. And then they sent me back to Vietnam. So I was in Tokyo like 2-3 weeks. So I had some experience at a place. And then when I wanted to get out of India, I wrote Karandar and said, we got no money. Send us a ticket. He said, on one condition, you stop in Tokyo for a month and give association. There's a small temple for like 4 devotees. So we did that. So then I'm sitting there, and since I'd been to Japan, when we were in Tokyo, Trivikram was in charge. And he, if anybody knew Trivikram or knows him, he has wanderlust. He cannot stay in one place, So he said, I want to go, And I said, okay, I got a guy in India, Gopal Swami. He wants out of India. Let him come. We called him up, and he said, yeah, I'll come. I'll be the president. So he came, and, Trivikram left. We left. And then I'm in Mayapur, and now they were building the first building, the Lotus building, and devotees were coming, for the festival. And there was a go-down up in the front. Anybody remember that? There was a go-down right where the front gate is, next to that. It's all been knocked down. And there was a pump. We used to just take our bath there. I lived in the go-down with all the cement bags. And I'm sitting on my porch there, and a bus pulls up, and off comes Gopal. He'd been to Thailand. He had on one of these Thai silk dhotis that wasn't quite matching with sannyas. And I said, I'm going to Japan. So I go to Gopal, can we come to Japan? He said, yeah. So that was that. Then when we went there, we had to figure it out, how to make this collection. I was going out every day until we broke the code. But, so to keep it short, 99% of the crappy stories you heard aren't true. I heard one the other day. We were robbing a jewelry store, and the guy chased us out and fell down and killed himself. And I don't know. There were so many rumors, that we were selling drugs and doing drugs, and nothing like that. Nothing ever happened. I got so tired of it, I came to Mayapur once. I believe it was 77, And Brahmananda asked me, is it true? There some crazy story. I said, boy, you guys, who makes this up? And then I wanted to, okay, let me play too. Boy, you should have seen that bank we robbed the other day, We just had, we had a core of few devotees that were there the whole time. Bhagavad-Gita was there, basically. Maharaj, who left us on his own will up in Radhakund. On his own will. He wasn't sick. He had a broken foot. He left. He told me, I'm going to go. That is what Prabhupada created, someone who is intensely his servant. And he was a great collector for years. Never fell in Maya. Every day. He wasn't the biggest, but he was there and he was steady. Bhagavad-Gita and Bhanu Swami and Pundarik, who's in Alachua. Then we went through 82 people. 2 months, 3 months. Temples wouldn't give any good men, They'd give me the guys they wanted to get rid of. Like here, you probably got a few you'd give me if I asked for a couple men. And, but Prabhupada's mercy was so potent that he'd turn a donkey into a racehorse for a couple months. And they would do fine, and then they'd snap or whatever their problem was, and go away. But 82. Shanti Parayan, Shanti from Hawaii? He counted it for me. He was there for a while. And then we were in a Mayapur festival, and Srila Prabhupada tells Rupanuga to go to Australia. And Rupanuga, he's one of these like World War III guys. I don't know what he is now, but then he was. I can't go there. World War III is going to come, and they're going to go take Australia because there's no people, and they can conquer it easy. And so Prabhupada said, who's going to go? I said, I'll go. Same with the China. I'll go. Keep volunteering like an idiot. And so I went. And I didn't like it, and I had to get back to Japan, and I had to go to Hawaii and Fiji. You know, Prabhupada came to he came. This is a good one. He came to Australia. So he says, we were going to New Zealand to install the deities, but they didn't want to give visas to Hare Krishnas due to Siddha Sarup and his people that were giving it a bad name. And they later they had explosives, and somebody blew off his hand. So Prabhupada got a special visa for like a week. And I didn't want to risk it being an American. I didn't need a visa. But so I put my karmi clothes on. And my karmi clothes were not your typical karmi clothes, you know. I mean, silk suit, Bali shoes, Frank Sinatra hat, silk shirt, you know, looking good, you know. Kukuine, you know. So the Prabhupada comes down the stairs, and he stops and looks at me, and he said, you look like a gangster. That was funny, you know. So we get to the airport, okay? And so we check in, and then the immigration or the cops or whatever they are, they take me and Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada sits outside. They didn't want him, they wanted me. So Prabhupada sits outside in a chair and take me in the room. So the guy's over at the long table. He's over there, 2 other cops, 3 of them. He says, your passport? So I flung it at him and hit him in the face. And he says, I thought you were religious. I said, if you thought I was religious, I wouldn't be in here. And they checked what they checked, and there's nothing. There was no, I think they were thinking I'm smuggling money, you know. There was nothing. So then when we came out, Srila Prabhupada says to me, what happened? I told him everything except throwing the passport, you know, but I told him they asked me, looking through my passport, you've been to many countries and many places. So outside of your America, you know, thinking everybody's nationalistic, what is the best? And I just, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I see, they're all the same. People are being born, people are dying, people are struggling to feed their family. You know, what's the difference? You know, just different country, you know, different thing, but different food, same thing. Prabhupada was so proud. And then in the purport, a few days later, he wrote, the spiritual master becomes very proud. You can see it, you'll find it in the Bhagavatam, when he sees his disciple has given up identification with his land of birth. You know. Then, yeah, Prabhupada, you know. Then we went to New Zealand, and then, you know, that was rough, man. I had to do the whole deity installation, and I knew all that stuff then, how to do this stuff, you know, but Prabhupada sat and watched me. The temple was full, so, you know, I go to bathe Jagannath for the installation, and the paint runs. They hadn't dried him yet. The paint was running. So Prabhupada, the look on his face was so merciful, like, boy, you know, Krishna, please tolerate these people. And so at the end of it, there was like only 8 or 9 devotees, but there was 50 Siddha Sarup people in the room. And it was like Christmas. They all brought Srila Prabhupada a present wrapped up, like Christmas. And he had a stack of packages. So they were all brought up to his room, and it was me and Prabhupada in the room, and I was opening up each package and showing him. And he had 2 piles, that one there, like this. So when we finished, he said, "Oh, that's my pile, that's your pile." So I had all this. I picked out what I wanted, and then went out and gave prasadam to everybody. Who wants the sweater? Who wants that? So then we went to Fiji, and on the day of the ground installing the Kaliya Krishna in the ground, this is Prabhupada's teaching, how he kept doing it. He says, so we were staying at a Vasudev's house. Vasudev was a very rich man. He owned hotels. He owned almost everything, the grocery stores. And he had actually, when he found out, the first time Srila Prabhupada was in transit in Fiji, he found out he's here, and they let him into the transit. And he became Prabhupada's disciple right at that time. So I was the GBC, and I just went and saw him. I said, "You're the GBC. Do what you want. You're a successful businessman. I'm just a kid. I can't tell you anything, He liked that, So we did that. It was super hot, Fiji. And then we came back to his fancy house. He had 2 wives, a young one and an old one. They all lived together, very pious people. And Gujarati feast, how that's going to be good, They had the little tables and the seats. So Prabhupada sat in the front. And I'm pretty skinny then, And Prabhupada, he looks at me when I come in and he says, "You eat too much." What? I was just like kind of in shock. Eat too much? I didn't eat today, So Prabhupada, you know how he was. Sometimes he'd take 5 bites, sometimes 20 bites, and sometimes no bites, and sometimes he'd eat 1,000 bites. So it wasn't always the same, his appetite. This day he had a big appetite. And he's chowing down, and I'm sitting there as they're serving me thinking, "You eat too much." And I'm like, starving myself. So that was a lesson for later in life, I think. But I remember the next morning, I used to get up at 2 o'clock. So I'm in the shower at 2. And the curtain swings open. And I'm in the shower, and it's Srila Prabhupada standing there. He said, "This is the mode of goodness." And he turns around and walks out. So then I think Shuddha remember this. Remember, you went to Fiji another time with Prabhupada, okay? And then you called me, and you wanted to get to Hawaii. Fiji is a boring place, So you called up and said, "These people keep dragging Prabhupada to all these different houses, and now he wants to extend his ticket because he can't say no to these people. He keeps saying yes." Remember that? And then I said, "Well, let's tell him there's an emergency in Hawaii," and then he has an excuse to say no. So you told him that. And then you were on the plane the next day. So then he did ask me, "What was the emergency?" And I said, "Oh, probably we miss you. Our hearts are breaking." Okay. So then, I'm just saying, all those previous things I talked about were, Prabhupada testing me, training me, did a lot more stuff than just go off to Japan because I had nothing to do. A lot of austerities and being in India and, all over the place. Then Prabhupada wanted that. So, any questions? People have questions sometimes. I don't know. You better ask him. What's the cost?
I can. All right.
All right. I just know, like in Mayapur, I asked Prabhupada, so Vrindavan is done. What do you want me to do? He said, send money to Mayapur. So the long building, the only money they got, every rupee was from our party. Nothing from nobody. Every rupee, you know. And we're sending this money every month. And, you know, the construction's going on at a fast rate. So I come to Mayapur, and Srila Prabhupada comes. And I come down, and we both go out on the balcony, the long hallway outside his room. And Prabhupada's looking at me, and he says, go down there and watch them, because they're stealing the cement. And they're mixing more sand in than cement, and the building won't be strong. So I said, Prabhupada, go tell Bhavananda to do it. He sits up there cutting roses, you know. That's his job. I get the money, and now I got to come here and do his job while he's cutting roses. Tell Jai Pataka, he's not doing nothing either, driving around in his Jeep. I talked to Prabhupada like that, and I'm telling you what I said to him. I said, I'm not doing it, you know, and I went upstairs. I didn't say, you never say you're not doing it, you just don't do it, you know. You never say to Prabhupada, I'm not going to do it, you know. So at the end of that, there was, all of a sudden, they want $20,000 more dollars. We had our budget, like $300 and some thousand. Now all of a sudden, then he wants 30 more thousand. And I'm telling him, I wrote Prabhupada, what's he doing with the money? And so we're there, Bhagavad was there, we bought all the land. All that land. The Pakur, we paid for the Pakur. The Grihastha house, the Prasadam hall. Nobody knows that, because Bhavananda and Jai Pataka Swami took all the credit, and they weren't doing anything. Sitting in Mayapur, you know, hogging up the glory. And we didn't say anything. So then Prabhupada wrote him, you know, no more money, what are you doing? And so when we went there, we went to the Grihastha house, and they had like 4 Bengali Matajis. I mean, real older ladies that know how to cook. And we were sitting down to this fabulous food. And after about 5 days, I asked Bhavananda, I said, well, you got a Sankirtan party? And he said, no. Then I said, oh, so you're taking from the construction money and living, you know, living like kings on the construction money. And I'm in Japan eating soybean oil and peanuts. It's true. Isn't it, Bana? We didn't eat outside. I had psychic tuition. Somebody come in from the streets, and I go, you ate an apple today. How did you know? You know? We didn't spend anything. Everything went to Prabhupada. In Hawaii once, you know, somebody gave $20, put it at Prabhupada's feet. I took the 20 and put it in my pocket, because you don't want it sitting there. Went upstairs, and I'm in the brahmachari room, which wasn't the brahmachari room at that time. I mean, yes, it was, but not officially. Then Prabhupada sends, I don't know who his servant was. Maybe it was you, or, you know, where's my $20? And I'd just given him like 80 grand or something that morning. I was like, where's my 20? Everything was Krishna's. Everything was Krishna's. So one time I gave Prabhupada $108,000. It was for Janmashtami. We'd collected. I came and I gave him my receipt. I used to put it in his bank account. You know? I'd give it to the BBT. And I had to smuggle money. If I'd have gotten caught smuggling that money every month, I'd have gotten 10 years in jail. But we were smuggling, I had to smuggle a briefcase to Hong Kong to change it into dollars, and then I could send it to India. That's the only option. you know. And then all of a sudden, because I was paying the BBT and they were sending that money to Prabhupada, they weren't sending it. And we're checking, 20,000's missing, 30,000. Rameshwar was stealing it. You don't know anything about ISKCON. It wasn't no bed of roses. There was some evil guys in there stealing Prabhupada's Vrindavan money, channeling it some other place, just like the Democrats are doing in America, channeling it to everywhere. Yeah.
There's 20 minutes left whenever you want to give it a little couple minutes to. I know, I'm fine.
Yeah, I understand. Anyway, I better change it before I start upsetting the cart here. What else do you expect? You know a little bit of that's going to come out.
If you want to just say that story of Krishna building your home. And
You tell them.
Oh,
I
no,
can't. I shouldn't be
good.
bragging.
I'm good to say.
You tell them. All right, that's bragging.
Panchakalpa tarubhyascha kripasindhu bhayevacha patitanam panavebhyo vaishnavebhyo namaha. I thought the 40th anniversary was very memorable. And we were thinking, I remember Guru Kripa mentioning this, it's a good job we're having the 40th anniversary. I don't know who's going to be around by the 50th. But there's quite a yeah. 60th, my goodness, right. So here we are. Wonderful. So I just wanted to mention something that Guru Kripa would never mention, but I'm going to mention it, right? I remember one time when Guru Kripa brought this big suitcase. It was a Samsonite, I think, extra large, and it was full of cash. And he took it into Prabhupada's room. We happened to be in the room at that time, Sarabi and myself. And I remember Guru Kripa, he was crying. And it was so energized, emotional energy in the room. I think we all had tears in our eyes. And Srila Prabhupada said to Guru Kripa, just like you are building Krishna and Balaram's home here in Vrindavan, Krishna and Balaram are building you a home in Goloka Vrindavan.
I'm sorry, I got to correct the story. Your memory's wrong. This wasn't here. It was said to me.
Yeah.
It was in the back seat of his car.
Oh.
And he turned to me and he said, I was in Hawaii. He said, when you were building Krishna Balarama Temple, they were building you a house in Goloka. I have seen it. It is very nice. And then he told me, he said, your name is Guru Kripa, one who has the mercy of the Guru, and also means one who is very kind to his Guru. All right, so I just get it straight, because I never brought Prabhupada a suitcase of money. Never. It was always in the bank. You know, how am I going to carry money into India, a suitcase? Come on.
You did tell me that story just a few days ago, but anyway. Right. Just on Guru Kripa.
I had a handful of money once, but that's
Okay. Just on Guru Kripa. I first met Guru Kripa. I guess it was early 73, I think it was. And there was lots of piles of stone chips and sand lots of materials, iron, you know. And I remember in the evenings, we used to sit on the chips, the piles of stone chips and sand, and learn Bhagavad-Gita slokas. And him and Yasodhanandan had learned many, many slokas. And I remember hearing that there's this one sloka, and it was the first sloka I'd ever learned. Na tad vasayate suryo na shashanko na bhavakaha yad gadva na nivitante tad dhamma paramam mama. That was the very first sloka I learned. I remember Guru Kripa chanting that one. That abode of mine is not illumined by the sun nor moon by electricity. And one who attains to my planet never returns to this material world. It's a very nice sloka of Bhagavad Gita. Anyway, just quickly, how much time have I got, by the way? Wow, fantastic. So much time. Right. So, just very quickly, I met Srila Prabhupada in the London Bury Place Temple. And we used to have really ecstatic artiks in the evening, the Sundar. We'd be out on Oxford Street, up and down for like 6-7 hours. Well, say 6 hours. And then we'd come back for the artik. And I was getting really very particular about the way I looked this particular evening. My dhoti, to make sure it was all straight. My tilak was good. Then all of a sudden, Dhananjaya comes running up. I was just about to go into the temple room. And he says, Gananava. He says, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you. And my heart started pounding. And so I went. And I met Srila Prabhupada. And I paid my obeisances, and he was sitting there. And as I got up, I could see the aura. Srila Prabhupada has this golden hue. And he said, I hear you know about construction work. And I used to be an industrial boiler maker, working on very big power stations. I used to do welding and pipe work and all kinds of stuff like that. And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, to some extent I do know construction work. So he says, I want you to go to India immediately, to Vrindavan, and start. But when I arrived in, I think it was July or August of '72, there was nothing happening whatsoever. We weren't even living on the land. So, things took 1 year. Nothing really happened until just before '73, just a little after '73. And it wasn't until Surabi came, and it wasn't until Guru Kripa and his Namhata party started collecting that things really started to move. And it got to the point where, two engineers behind, Mr. Lahiri, they were both Bengali, Mr. Uja, and we had a Muslim contractor, building contractor, a local man from Vrindavan. And then just fast forwarding, it was getting to the point where it was mentioned, I forget the history of it, but it was Srila Prabhupada wanted the temple built and opened by Janmashtami. And we just couldn't make that deadline. Even though at that time we'd employed over 350 workers working round the clock. The whole construction site was lit up like like it was daylight. And then Sarabi at the point realized that there was no domes. There was no facility for domes. And these domes had to be built secretly because we didn't really want anyone to know that the domes weren't built. And the design that was already established, not by Sarabi and his architect, by a previous architect, there was no real facility, so we had to build foundations. We had to dig. It was all night we were digging in the basement. And then eventually we managed to build these domes. But it wasn't until we hired all these extra workers that we were able to do and meet the deadline in Ramnami. Prabhupada was very, very upset. And but at least there was no advertisements going out, and we were fortunate in that sense. And Prabhupada, working with Prabhupada in Vrindavan on the construction, Prabhupada has two sides. He has the father-like soft rose personality, and then he has the thunderbolt, very, very heavy. Guru means heavy. It's one of the aspects of Guru. So eventually we got the temple open, and I remember the day after we were on the morning walk, and Prabhupada said, he stopped and he said, if I didn't think that you could handle my intensity, he says, I would never have asked you to come. So very humbly, Prabhupada thanks us for all the work that we had done. And I remember one time when we came out of Prabhupada's house, he had blasted Sarabi and myself for something, I can't remember what it was. And we went back to our room, and we kind of made a pact that whatever Prabhupada said to us, it didn't matter how intense it was, we would absorb it like a sponge, because we knew that Prabhupada was under so much pressure on so many different levels. They even wanted to build a fuel station right outside. They wanted to take the first, I think it was 35 meters, retain it, Sarafs. They wanted to do that. And Prabhupada says we just have to build very quickly, and that's what we did. But I want to relate to everyone today that story. It was a very busy morning. I was living in one of the rooms that we'd built, and I thought, I'm just going to try to take 10, 15 minutes rest, And I was just preparing to lie down, and all of a sudden, bang, bang on the door, like the door was being hit so fiercely that I thought it was just going to come down. I thought, who the hell's that, So I opened the door. Well, I had to drag it open because it was all distorted now. And there was Brahmananda. And, he's a big guy, And when he's not happy, he's got this frown, to go along with his masculinity. So, Prabhupada wants to see you immediately. And I thought, oh, what a greeting. I wonder why he didn't say that nicely. Hey, Kunanava, how are you going? It's, why didn't you come in? Prabhupada would love to see you. Something like that. Prabhupada wants to see you. Anyway, so I go in, and I thought, well, I wonder what's going to happen. So I'm in the room, and I was kind of positioned up against one of the walls of the big room where he did all his preaching to the guests that came. And Pradyumna Panditji was sitting on the floor. Brahmananda was standing some ways away. And Srila Prabhupada was standing over Pradyumna. And he was shouting. And he was shaking. And his eyes were like saucers. And the room, you could have just cut the atmosphere. It was so surcharged. And Prabhupada was shaking. He just didn't stop shaking. And he would bang his fist on the tables. I've never, ever seen Srila Prabhupada in this kind of mood. And it kind of frightened me to some extent. So I kind of used the wall as a bit of a prop to lean against, you know. And then I thought to myself, what am I doing here? What's this got to do with me? So the whole issue that unfolded was, when Panditji came to Vrindavan, he was a bookworm. He loved to get books, you know, go around the Goswami temples, meeting different Prabhupada, you know, God brothers and so on. And he met this one Grihasta, God brother of Srila Prabhupada. His name was Purushottam Das Adhikari. And he seemed a very nice person. He would come, he would listen to Prabhupada preach in the evenings. I met him 3 or 4 times. He seemed very gentlemanly, very Vaishnav-like. And then apparently, because there was a story that I wasn't really privy to at the time, where his godbrother had asked Prabhupada if he could borrow some Bhagavatams. And he took them back to the Radha Gopinath temple where he was staying. And he started reading the purports. And he had a notebook and a pen. And as he was reading the word-for-word synonyms, the translation, the purports, he was making notes like this. And I think he went through about a chapter and a half. So his notebook was starting to really fill up. And Srila Prabhupada found out, because his godbrother went to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, I've been reading your books, and I was going to suggest some changes, you know. And I just thought, I wonder what you like. Prabhupada at the time, when he was being confronted like this, didn't really show any rage or, you know, but he wanted his books back. So after he had left, the following day, which was the day now that I'm describing, yeah, they were original Bhagavatams, and also the 72 Macmillan. It was the first 3. They weren't what he brought. They were the ones that came from Brahmeshwar.
Okay.
Yeah.
BBT books.
Slightly later, yeah. So there was also the Macmillan 72 Gita also that he'd borrowed. So Srila Prabhupada was so upset that his books were being changed by his godbrother, or there was the idea of change. And then Prabhupada said, first of all, he had so many other books when he was translating. Sometimes Prabhupada would only translate a sentence all night, all morning, as long as he was doing it. Other times it would be a complete flow. And then Srila Prabhupada said, do you know what I am when I'm sitting early in the morning when you're all sleeping? He says, I'm a dictaphone. And he had around him Baladev Vidyabhusana's books, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, Bhakti-Vinod. He had so many reference material. But he said, and these are descriptions from myself. This is my subjective reality. He said, Krishna would also come and sit with me and tell me what to write. You know, these are not exaggerations, and they're not political statements either. This is reality. These are true descriptions. So Prabhupada didn't stop at that. He started raging again. How dare they think they can change books? Prabhupada would say, Prabhupada would be reading his books, and his disciples on different occasions would say, Prabhupada, why are you reading your own books? He says, because I didn't write these books. It was Krishna. He helped me. So I became Krishna's dictaphone. And then I would write in my, speak in my dictaphone. And then they would get recorded. How dare anybody think that they can change my books? I haven't finished yet. No, it's all right. I've got to say. So it was the very first time I've ever heard this. Pradyumna, he was like a ghost, and his head was down. And Prabhupada just kept on and on. Now what happens, you know when you try to reach high notes in your voice? Like opera singers, they can go very high. They got very high octave strength. Srila Prabhupada was going so high in his voice when he was condemning and shouting, and that he started to screech. His voice went into screech mode because there was nothing left octavely wise. And what are you to say? And Srila Prabhupada said these words for the first time. I've never heard them before, but I realize what they mean now. Asa Prayoga. Prabhupada said, you can never change the Acharya's books. Never. So, unfortunately, lots of changes have been made. And I'm kind of, sometimes I wake up in shock because I have dreams about that experience. And I mentioned it to the GBC, going back about 15 years ago. And they had a vote on it, apparently. Should we keep Prabhupada's books as they were, or should should we allow changes? And I was told by one vote of the GBC, it was decided to change the books. So when I'm not in Vrindavan, myself and my wife, Vishalini, we go out every day distributing Prabhupada's books, his original books. And we try to preach to people of a new generation. Because I sometimes I think, you know, a lot of us now are in our 70s. And we've got to think of the future. It's so important, particularly about the temple here in Vrindavan. We need very strong leadership here. Panchakoda has been fantastic. He's been here for 16 years. And he's really, I am very proud of Panchakoda because he's embellished layers and layers and layers of wonderful coverings, embellishments. not just on the temple, which is so beautiful, but it's everywhere. And now they're building that huge project. Because the Gurukula that was built, we had very little money. The budget was nothing, really, for a big school for X amount of students. And I said to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, it's not going to last very long because we're not going to be able to build a very strong building. And Prabhupada says, 50 years? He said, that is all right. Krishna's not a poor man. We can build another one. And now there is another one, a very big, in between Govardhan and here, you've got that very big school on the farmland there. So time's run out. I've got some fantastic stories to tell more. I'm writing a book. It's 2/3 finished. It's got over 70 one-to-one lived experiences with the Vapu experiences with Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. And if all goes well, I'll give you all a free copy. How's that? Anyway, that's it. Huh? I can have 10 more. Yeah. Right. He's a
You
guest.
glorified him, so he's giving you
Yeah,
time.
he's a guest. Do you want to go? Anyway, right. I need a volunteer for this one. Anyone want to come up? You got there's a seat there. Have a seat here. Bring your seat. The red chair, yeah. So, Srila Prabhupada was a real taskmaster. He taught me double entry bookkeeping in 2 hours flat, so I could make sure that I was accounting for every penny, every paisa, or every rupee that was spent. And one day, Sarabi and I, we had to go to Bombay. That's where Prabhupada was at that time. And we needed 2 lakhs of rupees. So what we did, we sat together and we made out a very detailed list of what we wanted and how much it was going to cost, right? And it was really nice. Sarabi had really nice handwriting and he was able to write it really fantastic. So we were waiting in a room outside of where Prabhupada was sitting. And there was a transcendental competition between Vrindavan construction and Mayapur construction. But there they had the big, there was Jayapataka, Bhavananda, Gagamuni, Achyutananda. There were so many sannyasis there. For us, it was like Gurudas, Yamuna, Sarabi, myself. And then later on, Gurudas and Yamuna went off to Jaipur with Bhaktis to take care of the deities, which they'd done an incredible job, So we heard all this kerfuffle going on in the room, and come out 5 minutes later with nothing. They went to get X amount of money, and they came out with nothing. Prabhupada didn't give them a cent. Because they took it for granted that they could just tell Prabhupada what they wanted, and Prabhupada was just give them whatever they asked for. And that's the case. So when we went in, we showed Srila Prabhupada, we told first of all Srila Prabhupada that we've come to get 2 lakhs, that we need that money. And Prabhupada said, what is it for? And then we produced this list. And he looked down and he took about 5 minutes. And then straight away, he agreed. You can have the 2 lakhs, no problem. Thank you. This is very nice you have brought this list. So he says, come back tomorrow and I'll give you a bank draft. So we go back the next morning, sitting behind his desk, and we're just kneeling in front of the desk. And Prabhupada registered post based on 50 paisa difference. That was the mentality of Prabhupada. You can see in the early days in that book that was published, when Prabhupada was going on bus rides, he'd buy a banana, he would buy some butter, his bus fare, it was all recorded because he said, this is Krishna's money. And he was recording everything. Nothing was his. So that's another story. But anyway, let's finish up, and maybe I can find some time to tell you other stories in relationship to family members Prabhupada engaged me with to help him. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, both of you, very, very much. It was wonderful. Siddhanta Prabhu is not feeling well today. I'm sure some of you can relate with that since coming to Vrindavan some days ago. So he asked me just to introduce. We know what's going to happen. It'll be the memory series. And he says tomorrow evening, he said, is really the clincher, he said. So the speakers he has for tomorrow. Of course, I was with Srila Prabhupada for a long, long time while he was doing his translating work and also giving classes. And outside of America, I would record the classes. And I remember a few times it happened. One time in Mayapur, and he was eating breakfast after class, sitting on the straw mat, little table facing the wall. And I came into the room and he looked at me. He said, "Did you record class this morning?" I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." He said, "Play it." He said it was a really good class. So as he said, even Prabhupada, when he spoke, he didn't consider that he was speaking at all. He considered that Krishna was literally speaking through him. And he would listen to his classes. And as I've said many times here in classes and other places, he read his books daily. Every afternoon, Prabhupada read his books. And from my vantage point, he exclusively read his books. He didn't read any other books. He read his books. and he told me on multiple occasions when he was reading different one of his books, if you read this one book, you can become Krishna conscious. And he said it on 3 different books to me on 3 different occasions on 3 different afternoons as he was reading his books. So anyway, if they're ready to get started with the memory videos, we'll go into the next part. And then after that hour, we're going to have the Sanatan Gauranga Band. And they're also allowing Panchagoda Prabhu. I think he'll be doing percussions. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
We took a group of devotees and we went to Vishakhapatnam. And Srila Prabhupada stayed at the Krishna Chaitanya Mission, which was the temple of Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj. So we stayed there 7 days. And Anand Prabhu was working in that mission. Puri Maharaj gave Anand Prabhu to Srila Prabhupada. You know, you've heard the stories of Anand Prabhu. He is Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's disciple. He's a brahmachari. He could do the work of 10 men. He would cook 10 preps for 200 people with 1 or 2 assistants. Later he came in Vrindavan. All the devotees from Vrindavan know him. He worked when the Krishna Balaram temple was being built. So we stayed there and he cooked the feast. 2 feasts a day. And Srila Prabhupada used to walk up and down as we were eating and say, eat more, eat more. And he would be so satisfied. Chaturvidasri Bhagavat Prasada, Svadana Triptan, satisfaction. He was so satisfied to see us taking this. And as a neophyte as I was, I was overeating and I had to eat. So I would eat, and come lunchtime, I had no hunger, 0, but I would eat again. And at nighttime, no, it was still in my stomach, and again, because it was so good. And after the 3rd day, then I threw up everything, finally, and went to sleep for about 8 hours in the afternoon, you know. But Srila Prabhupada used to take this, and that was a good incident. Many more. In Govardhan Hill, we went to Govardhan once, and on the Parikram, the only time he went there. So we were in the Govardhan, and we brought a big basket of puris and some sabji for taking lunch. So we sat on the veranda, and many dogs came around, and the devotees were eating. So someone threw a rock at the dog, and Srila Prabhupada said, no, this is Govardhan, everyone eats. And Srila Prabhupada took the puris from his plate and threw them to the dogs. He said, feed the dogs now. All the dogs must eat and they will be satisfied. Always mini prasadam. Prasadam is, everyone got prasadam. No one went away without some prasadam. Anybody visit, give him some prasadam, give him some prasadam. Srila Prabhupada would come in his room. Sometimes he would be, especially, this was when I would be out. I would come back, I'd been out serving, and I came back to Vrindavan or something. I'd come in his room, and then sometimes he would feed me with his hand. Here, he would take this rasgula and take this, and I would sit and eat, and he would share his meal with me. This happened a few times. He would share his meal with me, and like that, how was everything, and we would eat together. With his hand, he would give me.
When I joined in February '72, I found myself in India, in Bombay, and later on in May, just a few months. And that year, of course, that was building the Bombay temple. But when Srila Prabhupada came to India in the month of Kartik that year, devotees would trade off. A few devotees would go to Vrindavan, and hear lecture, then they'd trade off, some other people went. So I went with Hari Kesha, I went. And when I arrived, the first day, Srila Prabhupada was giving lecture in the morning on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the first thing that I realized, well, there's no difference between reading his books and watching him speak. It was the same exact thing. And I was thinking, well, I really better, listen carefully. This is the holiest place on the planet, in the courtyard of the Radha Damodar temple. And there was only probably 24 devotees there, something like that. And at some point I got to fan Srila Prabhupada during the lecture and that sort of thing. And after class, in the evening especially, because they had Nectar of Devotion class in the afternoon. And after that in the evening, Prabhupada would entertain guests and devotees would all crowd into his room and, darshan every night, And one time they asked Srila Prabhupada, what does it mean the spiritual master is the external representative of Krishna? And he said it's just that the spiritual master speaks what Krishna would speak if you could hear it. So he's the external representative of Krishna, Sakshat Hari. He's the by a medium to Krishna.
So I think it must have been 1975 when the opening of Krishna Balaram Temple was there. And every day Prabhupada used to go down they unfortunately still call it Chatikara Road, but it's now legally the Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg. So we would all walk with Prabhupada. So one day Prabhupada was walking down and he was just so heavily preaching against abortion and birth control. He was just going on talking about how nasty this abortion is, this Kali Yuga. And he gave the example, he said, just like if I purchase an apartment and I go there to take possession and you stop me, that is illegal. You will be arrested if I go to the police. Or if I'm living in the apartment and you come to kick me out, it is illegal. You will be arrested. Like that. So that soul, he's purchased that womb, that's his apartment. If you stop him to come, that is illegal. If he's inside and you kick him out, that is illegal. And he just went on saying about, you will go from womb to womb and you will never see the light of day. He was just preaching so heavily against abortion. And on the way back, he was a little quiet. And there was one Indian man there, and he suddenly said, "Oh, Prabhupada, I read today that this Guru Maharaj Ji, his mother has denounced him." And we all laughed. And Prabhupada said, "What is that?" He said, "This Guru Maharaj Ji, she's come in the papers and she's saying this guy is a bogus fellow and she's denounced him." And Prabhupada laughed and everyone laughed, and we walked a few more steps, and that Indian man said, "Yes, practically she has finished him." And Prabhupada stopped and he dug his cane into the street and he looked at all of us and he said, "She should have finished him in the womb."
I came to Vrindavan in early 1976. In those days it was all one GBC, and they wanted me to do some work with children in Vrindavan. And eventually I got to clean Prabhupada's rooms. Shruti Rupa had been cleaning Prabhupada's rooms, but one day and I was helping her. And one day she said to me, "Okay, Moksha, that's it, I'm going, you're in charge." So I was left with Prabhupada's rooms to look after, which was ecstatic. And the way it worked was, after Mangalatik, before Tulsi Puja even started, I'd leave and I'd go in the back way into Prabhupada's room through where the fountain is, although the fountain, I think that came slightly later, but it came around that time, the fountain through the back door. And I'd go into the prasadam room, or the breakfast room, I always called it. And you could see how Prabhupada had walked from his bedroom, the old bedroom, not where the bed is now, obviously, through the prasadam room and into his room, because the doors would all be open. And I'd sneak into Prabhupada's prasadam room, trying to make as little noise as possible, because he'd be sitting right there in his darshan room translating. And I'd slowly, slowly close the doors, trying not to make any noise. But he always looked up, and he'd look up, and I'd, pay my obeisance, close the doors, pay my obeisances, so as not to disturb him. And then I'd start cleaning the back of the house where his bathroom and the toilet was, and his bedroom. So when Shruti left, or even, it might have even been when Shruti was still there, she told me how the Prabhupada was complaining that his marble floor had become stained from the mustard oil. His massages was like, it looked like the marble stain, but it wasn't, it was actually stains on the marble, and how Prabhupada had complained. So I'd started systematically getting rid of these stains by sprinkling, I don't think you have it in America, in England we have it, it's called like Vim, it's like a white scouring powder. You get it here in India, and I sprinkled it all over the floor, and I got a hard broom, the Indian hard brooms, and I would scrub and scrub and scrub, and these stains were slowly going. So to do that, I'd be like Indian style, sari wrapped around my knees, squatting, scrubbing away. So there I was one day, sari around my knees, scrub, 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 and the door starts to open. I thought, oh my God, it can't be Prabhupada, no. And Prabhupada's head peeped around the door. He didn't open the door completely. He opened it a little way, and he peeped his head around the door, and he said to me, may I come in? Which I thought was such perfect manners, may I come in? Not like, get the hell out of here, you're in my bathroom, but may I come in? So I kind of like totally flabbergasted, because Prabhupada never went in the back of his house during that period. It was before he'd go on his morning walk. That was his time. He was at his desk. So I said, yes, Prabhupada, of course, Srila Prabhupada. Come in, Srila Prabhupada. I remember just kind of babbling like that. And I scurried out, and I paid my obeisances in the bedroom, which had a black floor. And I remember that I left this huge mess where, all this scouring powder which had been on my feet, on the floor, but Prabhupada like sailed over this mess. He just sailed right over it, didn't say a thing, because I could understand he was pleased that these stains were being left. But I always remember Prabhupada's perfect manners. May I come in? It was his house, not mine. He didn't need my permission.
So I went there in 76. We took Prabhupada's books. We showed them to scholars in Moscow and Leningrad. At that time, St. Petersburg was called Leningrad. And they appreciated the books. And then we went there again in 77. When I went there in 77, the late Prithu Putra Maharaj was there also, and Bhugarba. So we took part in the book fair. It was a very big book fair. And in the end, we got a certificate from the Soviet government appreciating Prabhupada's books for bringing world peace. So I received the certificate in Bombay around September 77. I took it to Prabhupada, who was in Vrindavan. His health wasn't so good. Prabhupada was so happy with that certificate that Soviet government has recognized Prabhupada's books as contributing to world peace. That Prabhupada showed that certificate to everyone who came. His godbrothers would come, he would say, this is the recognition we got from Soviet Union. Unfortunately, we've lost that certificate somewhere. I feel really sorry. But Prabhupada very much appreciated that the Soviet government was appreciating our books.
This was in Vrindavan, and we were going to the holy places. And on the way back, the bus broke down. So it was all women. And we weren't concerned, we were feeling very, very protected. But later on we heard that Srila Prabhupada was very concerned. He was very worried about us. And he kept on asking, where are the women? Where are the women? He didn't go to sleep until we returned. And he had also commented, he said that he was worried that after he left that the women would not be protected. So I thought that was very significant, that Prabhupada was so concerned about us and worried about, the fate of the women when he was gone. That really touched, really touched my heart.
And he would comment about the birds, the atmosphere of Vrindavan, And when he'd hear the artik going on in the temple, he'd hear the artik and he'd say, this is the perfection of human life, to be a pujari. He said, this is the highest service that one can perform as a human being, to be a pujari. And then he said, because with a material body, you're serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You're waking him up, you're bathing him, you're dressing him, you're feeding him. These are the actual activities that we are doing in the spiritual world. But in this world, you're doing this actions. He said, so this is the perfection of human life. There's nothing higher than you can be, but to be a pujari. So then I had always heard from my godbrothers that, distributing books was the highest service, which is a very elevated service. But Prabhupada was saying, on the absolute platform, the highest service is to serve Krishna eternally. And this is a way to actually serve Krishna eternally. So if you're a pujari, you've attained your constitutional position, even within a bounded samsara, even within, you're liberated. He's probably saying this person is liberated.
In fact, one time he was telling us how he stays Krishna conscious. He says, in my room, I have a madanga, so I can sit down and play it for a while. When I get tired of that, I'll go over and do some translation. When I finish with that, I can go to the harmonium and sing a song. Then I have correspondence to do, like one activity after another, all connected to Krishna.
Prabhupada had a particular mood in Vrindavan that he was extremely attentive to detail there. Especially, he was concerned that we should not be cheated by the local merchants, that nothing should be wasted, that everybody's behavior should be, proper to the proper standard. So he was on his porch area, which is towards the back of his house there. There was a second floor porch area where he sometimes used to sit to do translation at night. And he was looking over the balcony, and from where his balcony was, you could see into the kitchen, guest house kitchen. And Prabhupada began suddenly to shout, "Stop him! Stop him!" And so there was a big flurry in the kitchen, and suddenly they grabbed a hold of this person, and they took his chadar away, and he had a huge bag of sugar that he was stealing. And Prabhupada had been the only one that had spotted it. Just with the casual glance, you could immediately understand that someone was stealing it from the kitchen. And he was chastising, that nobody was, attentive to what was going on. But he was very, very careful like that. He wanted us to learn the same kind of carefulness.
When I went to receive a Gayatri mantra from Srila Prabhupada, it was in his room in Vrindavan in 1976. And so when I came into the Prabhupada's room, I paid my obeisances and chanted the pranam mantra. And after the pranam mantra, I said in a loud voice, "Jai Srila Prabhupada." And Prabhupada immediately responded, "Jai Srila Prabhupada." And just for a split second, once bewildered by this, and of course I immediately realized that his Srila Prabhupada was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And so what it indicated to me was that whatever honor that we gave to Srila Prabhupada, whatever respect, he was passing that on to his spiritual master in the line of disciplic succession to Krishna himself. So that was Srila Prabhupada's great quality as a pure devotee of the Lord, that he was the transparent via medium to Krishna and to the parampara.
I remember one class, that was when Prabhupada was saying how much money we had spent to come. And I thought, this is strange for Prabhupada to be talking about how much money we had spent. And he calculated how many we were and how much it cost. I think he came up with $200,000 we had spent to come to Vrindavan. And then he said, "This is very good use of money." because you have come to Vrindavan, and whatever you do in Vrindavan, that is multiplied 1,000 times.
And one morning, when we were greeting the deities, Prabhupada was offering obeisances to Gaur Nitai, and then going to Krishna Balaram, and then to Radha Shyama-Sundar. So when Prabhupada was offering obeisances, someone touched Prabhupada's foot. When Prabhupada got up, he told him, "Don't touch my feet." And then he continued on to the other altars, and then took Charanamrita. And then he sat on the Vyasasan, and there we were offering him garlands, chanting, we were touching his feet, offering him flowers, offering obeisances. And it was a little amusing to me, to see that, the contrast. But then I reflected on it, and I realized, well, when he's in front of the deities and offering his obeisances, he's a devotee. I mean, he's a spiritual master, but he's also a devotee, and he's in that mood, so he doesn't want his feet being touched. But later on, he's the ambassador of Krishna. So so Prabhupada always knew where he was. He was never confused in any situation, and it was so reassuring in one sense to have a person that it was always black and white. There was no confusion with Prabhupada. He always had the perfect answer. He was never, someone would ask him a question, immediately had the answer. He didn't have to refer to this or that, or thinking, or let me think about it. It was like bang, And an instant was the same thing. Prabhupada knew exactly, don't touch my feet. And it was a great lesson to be present, to see these things. Just by being in Prabhupada's presence, you would learn so many things, the subtleties of Krishna consciousness. So it was a beautiful experience.
So this was Kartik of 1972 in Vrindavan. And my husband and I at that time, we took our twin daughters who were 14 months old to India. And we were going to stay and live in India. He was going to do spiritual sky import business with Manibandha in Calcutta. But first we went to Vrindavan because Srila Prabhupada was there. So we arrived, and another devotee came with us. His name was Haridas. He's deceased now. So we got there, and the devotees took us in to, Prabhupada was staying at Radha Damodar, and they took us in, and Prabhupada said, "Oh, so Krishna has brought you here." And I thought, wow, I never thought like that. Krishna actually brought us here to Vrindavan. And he said, "Have you taken prasadam?" I said, no, Prabhupada. And he said, "You're following Ekadasi?" I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, I'm sorry, I forgot." I said, the devotees from London, they had given us some bread, and when we were standing in the line to get permission to come into the country, I said my children were hungry, and I gave them some, and I forgot, and I ate some also. I said, "I'm so sorry." And Prabhupada said, "Kirti Kirti, give them some sweets." Where I thought that, oh my God, he's going to say I'm going to hell. I've committed the most abominable sin imaginable. But he just totally just dismissed it and said to his servant, "Give them some sweets," like that. So that showed me how, even though breaking Ekadasi is such a very heavy thing, because it was unintentional and because it was innocent on my part, Prabhupada was just very, very merciful and very compassionate, and he didn't chastise me. So I felt a lot of mercy and a lot of love in that lesson of realizing that up the road, if anything like that should happen in exchanges with devotees, to let them know that when it's unintentional. And he didn't say, "Oh, follow the next day." Later on we learned that. If you break Ekadasi, follow it the next day. But there was not even any mention. And that was the most relaxed I had ever seen him, because we know later on he said Vrindavan was his home. So with the no shirt on, back in the chair with his hands behind his head, I got to see yet another side of Prabhupada that I had never seen except in the little performances when he was very childlike. But here he was just totally in his element at home in the holy Dham of Vrindavan. It was very wonderful.
Srila Prabhupada, he would give the most wonderful practical examples to explain the most difficult philosophical concepts for us, his aspiring disciples. One time in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada was struggling to present to us in terms that we could understand the fact that everything is absolutely conscious and sentient in the spiritual world. So he paused for a short time, and then he said, just like when Radharani is cooking for Krishna, she will ask the rice in the pot, "Are you ready yet?" And the rice will say, "No, not yet, give me a few more minutes."
Vrindavan in 1975 or 76. We were walking down the road. There were some events that led up to this, but we're walking down the road and Prabhupada looks and sees a pig get out of the water and run off. And Prabhupada started laughing. And he said, in New York, you have seen that library on, I think, 42nd Street, New York Public Library. Very big. Prabhupada said, so many books, thousands and thousands of books, Prabhupada said, all about sex. It's kind of funny how Prabhupada would sometimes exaggerate things for effect. And it was brilliant comedy, in a sense. Thousands and thousands of books, all about sex. How to make sex, how to study sex, the psychology of sex, how to have better sex. Prabhupada said, Dr. Freud, philosophy. Prabhupada said, but this hog, he has not read any books, but he can have sex with his mother, with his daughter, with his sister. Oh yes, he can do. And Prabhupada said that he can make sex better than you. And he has not read any book. So if you want good sex, then you come back as a hog. And he, it was just like a moment of just punching, Another time he was walking down the road in Vrindavan, and he saw camel off in the distance chewing on thorny trees, just like we read about in the Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada looked up, and prior to that, he had been very kind of growly. He was disturbed by some of the things that he considered to have not been yet managed correctly in the build-up to the opening of the Vrindavan temple. So he was pointing these things out, to the different people like Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Dayananda and so on. So I won't go into the details of that, but he was kind of growly, and then he looked up and saw these camel, and immediately he started chuckling. He said, just see, just like our Grihastas. And Sri Govinda Prabhu was walking next to Prabhupada, and he said, don't you mean the Grihamatis, Srila Prabhupada? And Prabhupada looked, and he's walking with his cane, and he goes, you are talking Grihamatis, I am talking Grihastas. So then he stops, and he says, isn't it so much difficulty, so much labor, like the camel? He chews the thorns, he's eating his own blood. Prabhupada said, there's so much labor, so much effort, so much work to have a child. And the wife has to suffer so much. Then labor, then the child comes, so much pain. And then Prabhupada said, and then the man, he has to work so hard, 20-year sentence. And then Prabhupada says, and 1 year later, the wife says, I want another. And Prabhupada says, this is Maya. And then from that, a whole conversation ensued about, well, some men have to get married. Otherwise, you say that all the women should be married, Prabhupada. Yes, that is best. But then some men are going to have to marry. And Prabhupada said, yes. And then he turned and he stopped and he looked right at Sri Govinda. And he put his finger up and he said, but when you marry, you must understand you are doing so under the influence of the modes of material nature. With the idea being that it's passion, not compassion, that brings us to this point. And then he said, you understand? And Sri Govinda said, he stared right at Prabhupada like terrified, you know. And he said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada turned and he walked. And as we walked by the camel, Prabhupada just laughed. He just chuckled. So, you know, it was almost like the Bhagavatam coming to life, you know. The verse in the Bhagavatam.
That time he told some stories in his room one night. He was speaking about common sense. And he said, he was talking about real intelligence. If a man is intelligent, he said, if a man is intelligent, he will, when he is lying on his back, he will naturally count the rafters. Very interesting. He was talking about common sense intelligence and the ability to be observant. And so he began to tell different stories. He said that when he was a child, during the rainy season in Calcutta, there would be a dripping pipe outside the window, and he would use the sound of that dripping pipe as a metronome, and he would practice his mridanga beats faster and slower according to the dripping of the pipe. And then he told one story about a train called the Punjab Mail, that a man was applying for a job, and there was a question on this job application, have you ever ridden the Punjab Mail? And the applicant said, yes, many times. And so the next question was, how many cars are there on the Punjab Mail, the train that brings the mail to Punjab? So the idea was, if you're intelligent, you will have noticed how many cars are on that train. And then he told another similar story. A man was applying for a job, two applicants came, and there was the man who was interviewing the applicants and his assistant. So one man came in, he sat down, he had his interview, he had many qualifications for the job, he was dismissed, he did not close the door after him, and he left. And then another man came, took his interview, sat down, took his interview, and he had none of the necessary qualifications for the job. But as he was dismissed, he closed the door properly behind him. And so the assistant to the interviewer said to his assistant, who do you think will get the job? And the man said, of course, the man with all the qualifications. And his director said, no, this man who has none of the qualifications will be given the job. But why? He said, because he closed the door behind him. So he will be able to be trained. We will be able to work with him. The other man, although he has the qualifications, he was not observant to close the door properly. So we won't be able to work with him in our company. So very interesting instructions about common sense and intelligence he was giving in his room in Vrindavan.
At the time of inauguration of the Vrindavan temple, Srila Prabhupada put me in charge of the kitchen, which always took a lot of my time. I missed most of the celebrations, festivities. So he also sent me to invite various saints of Vrindavan to come for the festival. I went to invite Karpatri Maharaj. Karpatri was the biggest impersonalist of India at that time, most respected person, very strict sannyasi. Because even though he was impersonalist, he was giving Bhagavad Saptahas and speaking about Krishna. He was living in Dhanuka ashram right next to ours. So I went to invite him for the inauguration. We had a week-long festival. Every day different saintly persons came. So I went to invite him. He said, well, I cannot come to your function. Why? I said, because your guru is giving Brahman threads to Westerners. This is not possible. This should not be done. So I said, well, why not? If they behave like Brahman, if they are rising early in the morning at 4 o'clock and they chant Hare Krishna 16 rounds every day, they study Bhagavatam, they study Gita, they study all the scriptures, and all day they spend in spreading the message of Sanatana Dharma. Whereas the Brahmins nowadays in India, they are becoming bus conductors and they are becoming factory workers and they are becoming postmen. So how do you think that they are Brahmins and they are not Brahmins? These people are not Brahmins. So I agree like that. I said, Chaturvarnyam Maya system, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. According to Guna and Karma, 4 divisions are devised. Then when I had gone to that Vallabhacharya, he also said that your guru is making Brahmanas, giving Brahman threads. So Prabhupada said, open Srimad Bhagavatam. So he asked me to bring Bhagavatam, 7th canto. Open chapter number 11. And it's the last verse. Narada Muni is instructing about the duties and roles of Varnashram in that chapter, 7:11. And at the end he says that if you see the symptom of a Brahmana in a Shudra, or a symptom of a Shudra in a Brahmana, then he should be accepted in that category whose symptom he has. Yasya lakshanam proktam tasya varnabhivanjakam yadanyatrapi drishyata tat teneva vinidishyata. This sloka Prabhupada made me memorize in 1975, 74. So this was like somewhere deep in the scripture, this sloka. So I quoted this sloka to Karpatri Maharaj, and his eyes popped up like this. He said, your guru has trained you very well. Because Prabhupada had told me this sloka, so I quoted this sloka back to him, Karpatri. Yasaya lakshanam proktam tasya varnabhivanjakam. So he said, your guru has trained you very well. Then he said, but there is a tiger, actual tiger, and a tiger like man. A man is considered, he's like a lion. So he's like a lion, but he's not lion. So he's like a Brahman, but not a Brahman. Like that, you can see how the Mayavadis use the word jugglery. So I came and narrated everything to Prabhupada, that this Karpatri was speaking like this. So Prabhupada said, did you tell him this verse? Yasya lakshanam proktam? I said, yes, Yasya lakshanam. And he said that your Guru Maharaj has prepared you very well. So I started laughing. He said, yes, prepared very well, everything accepted, but still he is so envious he will not come to our function. So unfortunate. This wonderful temple of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is opening. He appreciated, but it was too hard, Mayavadi.
I remember the exact date I landed, September 13th, 1976 was the first time I ever went to India as a brahmachari. And I arrived in Delhi and the devotee said, Prabhupada's in Vrindavan. So I just said, really? I didn't know even Prabhupada was in Vrindavan. So I went straight to Vrindavan. And I think I led a Sunday artik, the evening artik that night. So the next morning I was standing out chanting japa after Mangal artik, and Hansaduta Maharaj at the time came up to me and he said, Tranakarta, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you in his room. And I was like, I thought he was joking, so I said, joke around. He goes, no, Prabhupada wants to see you now, so let's go. Okay. So I go in Srila Prabhupada's room, I pay my obeisances, and I'm very nervous, And I get up on my knees and Prabhupada just come up, just standing by the door. He was just standing there, and he looked at me, and he said, "You are playing mridanga very nicely." He said, "Where have you learned these things?" And I said, "From tape Srila Prabhupada and playing a kirtan." I said, "But it's all your mercy." He said, "Jai." And then he said, and then he said something that really was, to me, really touched me. He said, "I remember you from America." I was like, "Jai Prabhupada." Then he pointed down to his harmonium. He said, "So you can play?" And I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." And he sat behind his harmonium. He started singing to Krishna. And actually, Harikesh was recording some of it. He was in the room. And I just started playing for Prabhupada. It was amazing. And it was very, very transcendental atmosphere, to say the least.
At one point in India, we had just arrived and we went in Vrindavan, and we went right into Prabhupada's room for darshan, which was filled with, devotees, maybe 24 devotees. And I sat in the back with my son and my daughter. And actually, I think I just had my daughter, because my son stayed outside at that point. But I sat down quietly. My daughter got up. She was 1 year old, and she started walking up to Prabhupada. And the brahmachari at the door started waving me down, trying to get my attention. No, get her. Bring her back. He's like motioning me to get the child and bring her back. You can't do that. And I just sort of looked at him like, looked out of the corner of my eye, saw him waving at me, and conveniently ignored him and looked at Prabhupada and made a motion like should I go get her? And Prabhupada put his hand up to stop. He said, "No, just sit down." Because he could see the brahmachari flipping out at the door. And then I looked at Prabhupada for the last instruction on that. I wasn't going to just accept this fellow at the door. So he told me to sit, and Shantaya proceeded to walk up to Prabhupada's desk, and I had no idea what she was going to do up there at one. She started to look around Prabhupada's desk and walk around, and then she looked at Prabhupada, and she walked over to him and crawled right across his lap and sat down on his lap. So everything else, all other conversations stopped as she took the show with Prabhupada, just exchanging their exchanges at that point, where he was playing with her and giving her a flower, and she was playing with his garland, and then she moved on and crawled off his lap, and he gave her a flower to take with her, and she came, then he nodded to me to come and take her, and so I picked her up and took her back to sit down. But it was just Prabhupada's his unlimited exchanges, with whoever, no matter what age they were, no matter who the devotee was, it was his, the relationship building. He was always exchanging in a sweet relationship, even with the youngest children.
I remember one time a disciple of Prabhupada went to his room in Vrindavan. I won't mention his name, he's a nice devotee, but he was a GBC man at that time, and his hair had grown out a little bit, to cover myself, I'll say a little longer than mine is right now. And when he walked into Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan, Prabhupada immediately said, "Oh," he said, "the hippie seeds are sprouting again."
And then another time, Prabhupada, he'd call us in all the time after every scientific conference. Every day he'd call us in to get the results. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj was, of course, his secretary then, and Sri Damodar Maharaj, and Madhava, and Jnana, and Siddhaputa, myself, we'd come in. And one time we came in, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "So Prabhupada, your scientists are here." And Prabhupada couldn't see that well then. And he said, they're all in suits and ties, because even though the conference was in the Vrindavan temple, we wore suits and ties. And Prabhupada said, so get them chairs. And either Sup Damodar Maharaj or Tama Krishna said, oh, we're your disciples, we sit on the floor. And Prabhupada said, no, they have to have chairs. But there weren't enough chairs. So I think 3 of us sat in one chair, and one of us sat down halfway pretending we were in a chair. Prabhupada couldn't see that well, but we couldn't sit on the floor, so we had to please Prabhupada. But he wanted his scientists, gentlemen, to be in chairs.
Thinking that sometimes all the other devotees, the servants would leave and I would be there fanning Srila Prabhupada. And I was thinking at one time, how is it that the spiritual master is sleeping? The Shastra says that the spiritual master never sleeps. So I was speculating and perhaps bothering Srila Prabhupada on a psychic level. Prabhupada was sitting there in his bed cross-legged in the outer veranda on the outside in his rooms upstairs in Vrindavan. And he was seemingly snoring and in deep sleep. Lip was moving back and forth, and I thought, Prabhupada's snoring, he's sleeping. But I thought the spiritual master never sleeps. And as I'm thinking this nonsense, right in the middle of my thought, as Srila Prabhupada's snoring, he said, what time is it? Completely clear and attentive. And I realized then that Srila Prabhupada knew exactly what I was thinking and wanted to destroy that thought. 8:33 Srila Prabhupada. And immediately in my mind I just, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. I realized I shouldn't think anything in front of my spiritual master except Krishna conscious thoughts, love and devotion, and the Maha Mantra, chanting of Hare Krishna.
There was one occasion actually when a number of sannyasis were in Vrindavan. They were doing this Chaturmasya. There's quite a few of them. Most of them were fairly newish sannyasis at the time, and they were all growing these beards, and they were all in the dham, chanting the extra rounds and things. It was a rainy season, and I'd been out with a group of devotees preaching, came back, and spoken to Srila Prabhupada about the preaching programs. And then Prabhupada came into the temple room and he just told all these sannyasis, what are you sannyasis doing here? Why are you in the temple growing beards, eating, in the name of Krishna consciousness? Sannyasi's business is to go out and preach. So in that way he sent all the sannyasis out preaching.
My most intimate association with Srila Prabhupada was in 1976 in November in Vrindavan. I was traveling with the Southeast Asia Library Party, and with Satyanarayan, and we had gone up to Kashmir, which is a Muslim, 90% Muslim district area. And we were going to the colleges there and the libraries and distributing books. So I found one library, an Oriental library, with an old gentleman there, and I was showing him the books, and he said, oh, I think I have these books. I said, no, it's not possible. It's the first time we've come here. He said, let me see. He went back, and he brought out Prabhupada's 3 original Bhagavatams. So I said, that's fantastic. And now we have, you should take all the rest of them. So he took the whole, all the rest, the whole complete set of Bhagavatams, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Gita, Krishna book, everything. So that was really nice. So he said that the author had come there personally. So that was far out. Nobody knew that Prabhupada had gone to Kashmir. So on our way back, driving back through the Himalayas, we passed an apiary where they had beehives and everything, and we were thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to get Prabhupada some real Himalayan honey, the real thing. So we got a big bottle like that. And we knew that Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, so we wanted just to go straight back to Vrindavan and tell him that we were preaching in Kashmir, and we'd distributed books, in the Muslim areas, and the Muslim colleges had taken it, and like that. So we arrived in Vrindavan, and Jagadish was Prabhupada's secretary at the time, and he knew me and Satyanarayan from Canada, in Toronto. He knew me, and he knew Satyanarayan from New York. So he said, okay, I'll try and arrange it. And then he came out a few minutes later and says, yes, Prabhupada will see you. So we came in, and Prabhupada was sitting with Gopal Krishna, and he was speaking to an Indian gentleman. And when we came in, he turned around and went like this and said, here are two very nice boys. So we came in, and we sat down, and Jagadish introduced us. And Satyanarayan spoke first and explained we'd been in Kashmir, and we preached and everything like this. We were the library party, and he was very pleased. We were distributing his books. And then his eyes opened really wide when he heard we were in Kashmir. He says, Kashmir. I went to Kashmir. And he said, do you remember when you come over the crest of the hill and you see the Kashmir Valley? Yes, Prabhupada, we saw it. And he said, yes, I distributed my books there. So then I spoke up. I said, Srila Prabhupada, I met that gentleman. He took your first 3 volumes. And then I distributed, after that, he took the whole set of your books, standing order. So that was nice to connect with Srila Prabhupada. So he was reminiscing about that. We spoke for about 5-10 minutes. And then what really stuck in my mind was just before we left, he looked me right, he was speaking about preaching and everything, the importance of preaching. Then he looked me right in the eye and he said, so, wherever you go and whoever you meet, just tell them about Krishna. And in this way, you become Guru by Lord Chaitanya's order. And that really left a big, he was looking right at me. So when I left there, I thought, wow, if I don't tell people about Krishna, I'm in Maya, total Maya. So I thought, this is my mission. And we gave Prabhupada the bottle of honey, which he graciously accepted. And then Palika, who was his cook, she told us later that every morning Prabhupada used to like to have a little bit of that honey with his breakfast. So that was very nice.
We were in Vrindavan and got to clean his quarters every day. And then every day after lunch, Prabhupada would rest. And when he got up at 4 o'clock usually, we'd bring him fresh juice, a fresh garland, and sandalwood pulp. And so I had to make the garland one day. I had to find the flowers. First of all, it's not like it is today. You go to Vrindavan and outside you have 1 million flowers you can purchase. At that time outside there was 0 flowers you could purchase. You had to go all the way in town to the Banki Bihari temple where they had some flowers outside of that temple. And somehow I scrounged up some flowers and made a nice garland with marigolds and roses. And I was less intelligent somehow and put some water in that garland before I put it in the fridge. And when they came and when they put it in Prabhupada, it was apparently wet. And he took it off immediately. And that was a chastisement that went deep into my heart, that he didn't accept my garland that time. And I just realized, we have to really use our intelligence and the best of everything for the Guru. Otherwise, he might not accept our service. So that was a deep realization.
So 1 year in Vrindavan, Prabhupada, you'd have to let all the devotees and different people in up to a certain point, and you'd have to stop the different devotees from coming in. And Prabhupada would always give such wonderful darshan. Sometimes you could just see Prabhupada, just his mercy reaching out to so many people. It was just, you could cut the air, it was so thick, and you just want to cry. And that's just, so if you go to so many darshans all the time, just seeing that is that you're seeing the great wonder Prabhupada had over people, had over devotees and visitors. So one day we were in Vrindavan, and a gentleman came, an Indian gentleman in the back. I really didn't pay attention because it was all full room. And Prabhupada said, we're getting toward the end of the darshan. And he goes, where's the prasadam? And that was my responsibility, to make sure everything was there. And I just realized there was no prasadam. Prabhupada had just told me earlier that or the day before, make sure every single person that comes to his darshan gets some prasadam. And he said, if there's not enough, then some of the devotees you cannot. But if there's enough, everyone should get prasadam. So he just looked at me, where's the prasadam? And I was like, so immediately I ran back into the back and I went into the deity's pujari room and said, where is the sweets are supposed to be for Prabhupada's distribution? And he says, well, someone was sick and they didn't make them. And I go, oh my God. So I was looking in there, and I went into the deity's room just before they were making an offering, and I said, what is that? There was this whole tray of Mahasweets that they were going to give to Radha and Krishna. And I thought, very quickly, and I took that tray. And as I took that tray, I brought it into, I put it on a transfer plate because I had it on the deity plate. And I brought it into Prabhupada. Now I was under a dilemma. How am I supposed to offer this? You can imagine, it was like in my neophyte mode. I'm trying to think, now I've got this prasadam. Am I supposed to bow down and offer the 3 prayers first? I was like in this dilemma. Prabhupada just looked at me, obviously like saw through me. He goes, who is this nut of a disciple? And he said, come here. So he called me here and he said, open up this is the plate I had. And he said, oh, I opened up and he looked at it. Now just maybe. And so, and my trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, Prabhupada saw my anxiety. He came and looked at it, and then I realized just by offering it to the spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada was so potent that that would be accepted for Krishna. After I took it from Krishna's plate. So then I distributed it to everyone. But someone in the back of the room had left without, I guess, first me giving it to it. And Prabhupada said that, he said, there is one man, he has left. You must give him this prasadam. You understand? You must give. And I'd never seen that before. So it was just a couple of seconds, so I took some prasadam when I expected to see the person just outside the door. But he wasn't there, so, oh my God, how did, I thought so I kept going farther and farther toward the gate, still didn't see him, and finally went to the gate, and there he was at the gate. So just in a matter of seconds, he was up at the front, which I thought was very unusual. But then I had caught him, and I gave him this prasadam and said, my spiritual master wanted me to make sure that you had some prasad. Yes. And then he looked at me and his head was covered with a chadar, and he was very, very unusual features, very Indian, but very, very regal. And he said, your spiritual master is very kind. And it kind of caught me, and he went down the road. I guess I turned in, I went down the road, and he wasn't there anymore. So as I was going back to Prabhupada's, I was thinking, who are these personalities that, that come even in to take darshan of Prabhupada?
Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Jai Anilo Premadana Karuna Prachu
Prabhupada's disciples speaking about him. Right here, Panchagoda Prabhu. He's an old friend of mine, and somehow or other he has me living here in Vrindavan, very happily trying to help him out. You all know him, and he's going to carry on from here.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. So we were delighted to have everyone come. For a whole year we were in anxiety thinking about how to celebrate Prabhupada's Krishna Balaram Mandir 50th anniversary. And we put a committee together. A lot of energy and thought went into it. And I hope that all of you have had a wonderful experience. We have another day or so. I first came to India in '78. I wasn't here for the opening, and every year we'd come because, the Mayapur festivals and the Vrindavan festival. I spent almost 20 years in Miami, book distribution for many of those years, and then management. Also managed the temple for eight years or so. We moved my family in '93 to Vrindavan. At that time, Kadambakanda Maharaj and Gopal Krishna Maharaj asked, please be quiet. He asked if we can stay here and assist Kadambakana Maharaj. At that time, we were 80 lakh rupees in debt, and it was a challenge because everything was obviously Gunarnava Prabhu knows that Lakshmi wasn't easily coming. Now we see over so many years, over 30 years have passed, and how quickly the society's grown, and how the temple is growing and expanding. So we want to do, many temples have discussed this, and the society understands the need of a devotee care project, because so many devotees sacrifice their time, their life to serve Srila Prabhupada. And you can put it up now. About 6-7 years ago, we tried to start a devotee care project, but there's always so much going on. And in Mayapur, they discussed it, the GBC. So just before Gopal Krishna Maharaj left for Dehradun, Shuddhakirti and I spent a couple hours with Maharaj in his room, and he was expressing that he's giving this land right behind right behind our guest house, and we were going to do a devotee care project. And this devotee care project will be suitable for those who are ready to come to Vrindavan, or ready or not, just come here to spend their time hearing, chanting, being the association of devotees, and just a few steps from Krishna Balaram Mandir. We'd provide all kinds of facilities to accommodate them. We also have working with hospice, and in Vrindavan, we regularly take care of the last rites, Jamuna. So this project, our Vrindavan Executive Board and our EC, our Executive Committee here in Vrindavan, we decided to put, it'll be basement, ground +3, 25 nice rooms with facilities, and just like I said, right behind Krishna Balaram Guest House. But we want this to be available for the devotees who have dedicated their time, their life, and energy to serve Srila Prabhupada's mission. And there'll be policies and procedures, but we'd like to encourage all of you. We're going to put it up on our ISKCONVrindavan.com website, and you can see all the details behind. Right now, we also, for the last 2 years, because as it was mentioned, the Gurukula building was becoming unsafe. And we had 2 or 3 structural engineers giving us detailed reports on how it was totally unsafe. So we bought this property, and the Gurukula shifted to our farm. We have an eco farm. We have about 120 acres, developing the eco farm, and also the Gurukula is located there. And we have good architects, engineers. We have a project manager, Rishikesh Krishna Prabhu. And the builder is also very good and very cooperative. So we're moving ahead quite quickly. We're finishing this big project within 2 years. And while I have the momentum, and we have our structural engineer and our project manager, I would like to do both simultaneously, because 2 is better than 1. So we got the big project here, and then we could do the devotee care project as well. And anyway, it was just a short little heads up that hopefully within a year's time, we'll have a devotee care project also in Vrindavan Dham. So we're going to have a little musical performance. That's good? Yes. By the Sanatan Band. It's actually quite nice. They asked me if I would play drums. I used to play drums before in a little rock and roll band. So these are my drums I brought from America many years ago. But whenever Krishna and Balaram they're always killing the demons or destroying the demonic elements, the demigods are playing cymbals and drums and bugles, and and dancing and chanting, and that's what goes on. So, because we're hearing, chanting, and dancing, and music is part of what it's all about. So I encourage you to please stay. I went to the rehearsal because they asked me to play. I thought, okay, I might as well, play the drums. And it was very, very sweet, very nice. I think that you'll very much enjoy the mood of it. It was devotional bhajans. And yesterday we rocked the house with the Madhava's rock band. And the Sanatan rock band is a extension of the Madhava's rock band, but we're doing a simple, very nice presentation. So everyone chant Hare Krishna together for a few minutes while we set up. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama.